Welcome back to part two of our three-part series on how to create a budget for a financial goal. So in part one, we created Google Sheets, we found a measurable financial goal, as well as a picture to motivate us, and we organized all of our income and expenses into a table. We're going to be picking up from there. Let's get into it. All right, so first I want to apologize for not being zoomed in enough. I'm working on like a 35-inch monitor, and I realize a lot of you guys are on Chromebooks, so we are significantly more zoomed in this time. I've also hidden my future job, and I'm only going to be talking about a fixed salary or odd jobs. And at some point, hopefully, if you're researching future work, it'll behave very similar to the fixed salary once you start working, as long as that is going to be consistent. So these seem like the only two cases I really need to worry about. My goal was to save up for a $5,000 Honda Civic. If you're working with a fixed salary and make a good amount of money, you might realize that you've come to your goal much earlier than you've already mapped out, in which case, great job. We probably need to remove some of those months or years if we went really far and trim that down. All right, I'd like to make one more column. I'd like to make the total amount saved. And I'm going to insert a column by coming up here to the column, right-clicking or control-clicking on a Chromebook, and hitting Insert One Column Right. I would like to know my total amount saved. So let's call this Total Saved. So here we're going to be using formulas in case you missed it from the last video when I talked about it briefly. Obviously, this little f of x is fancy math. That's for a function of, this is the formula spot in Sheets, where you can do all kinds of time-saving formulas so that you don't have to manually calculate everything, along with the possibilities of errors that would come from manually calculating each line. So I can tell Sheets 2 if I just type in here, so I can either click twice inside of a cell, or I can click once inside the cell and type up here in the formula bar. If I would like this to be equal to, and it knows me very well. It knows I want to use these two cells to its left. But if I add up my income and my expenses, I'll end up with more money. If only that were the case. What needs to happen is I need to find my income minus my expenses. So I'm not going to use its suggestion. But each time, how much we've saved for the first month is just going to be our income minus our expenses. Now, that won't be true for the next month, right? Because certainly we're going to get our income minus our expenses. But presumably, if we saved some money last month, we're going to add that. So I'm going to say plus the total from the previous month. Now, that'll be true for each following month. I'm going to keep adding to that total. So I could, again, put equals my income minus my expenses plus my total. But you'll see a pattern here. And Sheets can see that pattern too. As long as your formula is referencing the two cells to the left to subtract, and then adding the cell above, what we can do is we can say, hey, those cells relative to the cell we're working in, you need to take the far left cell, so here, minus this cell here, and add it to this. And as we drag this down, it'll do the same thing for each month. And you can see all of these totals are correct. Each month, we're saving an additional $1,800. Let's change this, by the way. We're now in the green, so let's make that green. We don't need $14,000 though. We only need $5,000. So if, and you're in a similar case, let's say you're saving up for something very inexpensive and you're making a good amount of money, or you're making tons of money and you pick something moderately expensive, then after a certain period, you'll have enough money. So here, if I want $5,000, heck, I'll have saved that by March. So I can actually, in this case, remove all of these cells. And you can see the total saved up is $5,400 because I made $10,000 and I spent $5,000. So all the math checks out. Now, of course, I need to be able to create a visual representation. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to represent this with a graph of our table of values. We need one more column to be able to see our goal, because our goal needs to be more than just a title. It needs to be shown in our graph. So I'm going to insert one more column, and I need a goal. So my goal is the same. It's $5,000. It doesn't change from month to month. And obviously, as you can see, I will have saved up enough by March to be able to reach my goal. Now let's do what we came here to do. I don't actually need these sums. Let's clean this up a little bit, because part of the grade for all of this, once it's done, is going to be how organized and legible your data is. So let's clean all this up, make it look pretty. This is a separate scenario than my odd job scenario. This is just if I had a fixed salary. And obviously, I'm only going to highlight these cells. If it took you many, many months to get there, then you'd be highlighting more cells. But if you click in a cell, and you can either click and drag, or you can click, hold Shift, and then click the other corner of where you'd like to highlight, you will highlight all the cells in that rectangular square. Anyhow, I would like to then insert a graph. So let's go to Insert, and we don't see graph up here, but we do see chart. So let's insert a chart. Now, you may or may not get an appropriate chart. We need to pick a chart that's appropriate. What is going on here? So I'm going to first shrink this down a little bit so it's the same size as my data. It looks a little bit nicer. And then let's talk about what chart it has chosen for us, because it may not be appropriate. And you may get a different chart based on your data. So here it's showing my income, my expenses, and my total saved, as well as my goal. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense, because as soon as my yellow, my total saved, exceeds my green, my goal, well, we've saved more than our goal. So we will have reached our goal in March. But this, to me, doesn't seem like a very appropriate table. So what we can do is we can double click this, and we can change the type of data table. I'm going to move myself here. You can see the chart editor options. I'm going to choose, instead of a column chart, I would like a line chart, because I would like to see when we reach our goal. This doesn't look great, does it? Because we've got both our goal, which is important, and our total saved, as well as income and expenses. Well, we probably don't need to really see our income and our expenses. So let's actually remove our income and our expenses, since we've already used those to calculate our total saved. Now we can just see our total saved going up over time, and hey, right before March, we will reach our goal. This seems like an appropriate graph. We have months on the horizontal axis. We have numbers on the vertical axis. So we come up here to our data, and let's tell this data that it's dollars. That specifically ask you to give your graph an appropriate title and have sensible axes and labels. Do our axes make sense? I would say yes, this is sufficient for me. But if you had multiple January, say it's going to take you years to save up, you might need to have both months and years. Your axis wouldn't make sense if it's just some January. Which January? As in this month, or like 3 years from now? Big difference. So for me, this makes sense, but I do need a chart title. So again, how I got there was customize, chart axis and title. I'm going to change the chart title to, for me, saving for a Civic. Now, I would like this to look nice, because part of the grade is for your organization and neatness. For whatever reason, this defaults to left aligned, just like we've done in Word or Sheets or Docs or Slides. You can change your alignment here. Pick lawful good. Let's pick center aligned. And let's make it bold. And I don't like that it's gray. It's hard to see, especially if that's a dark background, or if we're not on a nice screen. So let's change that to black. We could also change the size if we wanted to, so we can make that a little bit larger. And if we want to be real fancy, hey, our Civic is blue. Let's go ahead and make this blue. So we have created a graph for our data. Let's do that one more time. This time we're going to do it with odd jobs, where there's a little bit more going on, right? So we're going to have to organize our data even better. I'm going to scroll over to the right a bit. And first thing, let's, because we know we're going to have to, let's make all these numbers into dollars. Dollar bills, y'all. Again, I'm just going to choose the dollar for my currency. If these aren't, if you didn't include cents, you got no cents about you, you can actually decrease the decimal places so it looks a little bit. All right, I am again going to need to total up how much I'm making, how much I'm spending, which I have done, and then my total save. So I need a few more columns here. Let's insert one more column, and total earned, and let's make this bold, since it's going to be the total of all of these numbers to the left. If I'm babysitting for 200 and I'm shoveling drives for 100, then I'm earning in total a formula, which is going to just equal, and here I am going to use the sum formula that it suggests, because these are all positive numbers. It's the sum of everything to the left. And again, I have to change this to green. And because the total earned each month is just going to be the sum of the things to the left, we can just click and drag this down, and it'll add up all those numbers for us. Now, the problem is we didn't quite make it to our goal in August, so we need to go a little bit further. I'm going to remove these formulas, And let's extend our graph a bit. So I'm going to get rid of the bottom of this, and let's keep going. Let's see if we'll get there in a year. So in the September, we probably are still mowing lawns in the fall, so we're making that good money. October starts to fall off, getting colder. Let's go back to 180. November, December, we're not mowing a lot of lawns. Maybe one time we're mowing lawns. We said about $30 a pop, and then nothing in December. Now we're saying babysitting is consistent, so we're going to earn that every month. And then once it gets to November, December, hey, our driveway shoveling business picks back up. So we're shoveling 4 and 5 drives again. I'm going to reformat everything, make it nice and pretty, since part of this is staying organized. Let's make this all dollars again because it defaulted to numbers. And let's drag down our total earned for these months. And our expenses, we're going to stay the same. So let's see if we've made enough money. Rather than create a sum down here, I'm actually going to need a column anyway for the total saved. So let's come over here, insert a column to the right. Our total saved will, of course, just be the net change between how much we earned and how much we spent for the first month. Then every successive month, we're going to earn some money, subtract the money we spent, but then add the money we already had saved. So our total should increase over time. And again, this formula, if we click in there, we can see this number minus this number. So earned money minus expenses for that month, and then add it to the previous total. So the next month would be the same. We're going to earn some money. We're going to subtract our expenses. We're going to add that to the previous total. Because both of these formulas are referencing left cells above, left cells above, left cells above, we can see that pattern will continue, and we can just click and drag this formula down. So, hey, by the end of December, we will have $2,700. We're halfway there, living on a prayer. Now, because I've tracked January through December, I can predict most years, unless we have an anomaly in climate change and weather patterns, will be similar to the same income, as long as I'm babysitting for the same person and I'm earning the same amount approximately from shoveling drives and lawn mowing. So the good news is we can literally just copy and paste all of this below with an asterisk. Like I said earlier, we need to make sure our axes labels make sense. January and January are both January, which is which. So I'm going to quickly add 23, and then next year will be January 24. Okay, so let's copy and paste another year. And we're just going to change these all to 24. All right, so heading that possible error off the pass, we can now drag down our formula, and we would expect that before the end of the second year, we should have hit our goal, and we do, in October of 2024. So let's finish organizing this, make it look all pretty. And I need to think strategically about what I want to see in my graph. Well, I'm certainly going to want to see the month and what I'm doing. So let's put down here, months, month, comma, year. This way we'll get a label for our axes. So I definitely want the month and year. I don't need to know how much I'm making in those odd jobs, but I do need to know my total amount saved. So if we now have highlighted all these cells, we hold Control and can click and highlight some more cells, and they'll still be associated with those. But wait, we don't have our goal yet. Let's put our goal in there. I want to grab the title of that column, because this is all the years and months. So I click and drag, select all of those through October, since we know that's when we're going to hit our goal. And then we need to hold Control, click, and I'm going to grab another rectangle over here that'll include my saved and my goal, because I want to see how long it'll take, how much I've saved, and have I reached my goal yet. I will now insert a chart. That one's not terrible. Again, we're trying new types of charts, so we're experimenting with appropriate representation of data. This one is another type of bar chart that doesn't have many stacked bars. And heck, we could do stacked columns if we want to see something really crazy. This could be useful for things like total expenses. If you had multiple expenses broken down, you can see where you're spending your money. But what we want is to see over time where we're approaching our goal. So again, we're going to select the line chart. It's all going to depend on your situation. Now you can see this isn't a line. It's actually a piecewise function. It's a series of small lines, but the income amounts change, right? Because you see in February, March, April, we're making less money. Well, those are the months that we're not shoveling drives or mowing lawns. So in the transition periods between winter and spring or fall and winter, there's less odd jobs to be done, even though we're always making something because we're always babysitting. So this makes sense. And this is more real if you are working odd jobs. You're not making the same amount of money every month. So we don't expect a perfect line. But we can see here, by October 2024, we will have met our goal of $5,000, which is what we wanted to see. I do need to change these all to dollars so I can get dollars to show up on my vertical axis rather than just a number. I can change these to only go to 0 decimal places, so it looks a little bit cleaner. My vertical axis is now set. My horizontal axis includes both the month and the year, which is important. I've got a good index that shows what the two lines are. My goal is the 5,000 red line, and my total amount saved is the blue line. But of course, I need the title. So I'm going to double click this. That'll open up my chart editor. I'm going to go over to customize, and I'm going to give the chart a title. My vertical axis is money, and whether it talks about the total saved or the goal is obviously the two different lines. You could add axes titles here as well. I just need a chart title for me, so this is saving, comma, oddly, towards car. And same issue, it shows up initially as left aligned. I'm going to make it nice and bold and, like our car, blue. So we have two different line charts. If you have a fixed salary, you're earning the same amount, you will have a perfect line. If, such as the real world, we don't have the same amount that we're earning every month, then we're going to have a piecewise function, which will look a bit like a curve. And if we charted this out over more time, you could see that was a repeating pattern because we're earning the same kind of gains in the winter and summer, and we're making a little bit less in those transitionary months, and that happens every year. And before we submit this, we're going to make sure that our axes are labeled and clear, that we have an appropriate graph. So if you came up with a, oh gosh, heaven forbid, you came up with a pie chart, you fix that because that is not an appropriate representation of this data. Ooh, that is very odd. So make sure you choose a type of chart that is appropriate. Usually it's going to be a line chart. There are some exceptions, but here, and for both my examples, a line chart made more sense. And that we have a title that is formatted nicely and everything is legible and well organized. Hopefully this has been helpful and that you can now create a chart that represents your data graphically, that is appropriate and is easy to read and understand. Next time, we're going to be going over modeling this with a linear function so that we can predict, even if it's far out, how long it will take to save up money for maybe a bigger goal. Or if your goal is going to take multiple years, not just about 2 years, but exactly how long it will take you. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.